This is a story about choices that change people's lives in significant ways, leaving lasting marks. It's a captivating tale with surprising twists and deep human insights. Frank Walker stood alone at the end of the server's table, watching other customers enjoying themselves, taking strolls and making phone calls. Coffee was served and the celebration continued, but Frank was distracted by an unexpected message from an anonymous sender. The message warned him that Mark Leia might be trying to win over his wife. This surprised Frank, and after reading the note again, he saw his partner dancing with Leia, which worried him. When they disappeared from view for the second time, Frank decided to act. Before he could move, the music stopped, and he saw them leave the dance floor, which reassured him. He returned to his seat and watched as his wife and Leia went to Mark's table to talk with him and his friends. Soon after, Leia left, and his wife came back to say goodbye to Frank, telling him she loved him. She then walked towards the restrooms. Frank felt something was off about her hesitation when she declared her love. He quickly realized she was not going to the restroom for its intended purpose and decided to follow her. As he approached, Leia and his friends blocked his path and told Rose to leave their table. Frank worked as a problem solver for various companies, which required him to travel to different countries to address issues in their administration. He often dealt with high-ranking bureaucrats who used money to climb the ranks, and he faced bribes, deceit, and coercion regularly. These supervisors and executives would exploit and threaten workers while boasting about their power. Whenever Frank made decisions that affected people's jobs and well-being, he faced resistance, intimidation, and even threats. Frank Walker was determined to help move a U.S. manufacturing company from Mexico to Alabama, despite interference from a drug trafficking organization. Frank excelled in his job, thriving even when dealing with ruthless and dangerous people. When Mark Leia and his group tried to intimidate Frank, he quickly turned the tables, making them realize the consequences of their actions. Intimidated, they stepped aside, allowing Frank to pass. Frank caught up with his wife, Brooke, just as she was about to leave the event. He called out to her, but she either ignored him or didn't hear him. He quickened his pace and called out again, "Brooke, where are you going?" This time she stopped and turned to face him with a frustrated and curious look. "Why are you here?" she asked, acting unusually distant. "Where are you headed?" Frank asked again, looking into her eyes. Brooke looked away, realizing this situation was not what she had planned. She struggled to come up with a believable story. Earlier that evening, Brooke had crossed paths with Mark Leia. After using the restroom, she walked past Mark's table, and he stopped her for a brief conversation. She then returned to her table with Frank and the others. As the evening continued and the band began to play, Mark approached their table. He was a local soccer star and sports icon, and everyone was excited to see him. He introduced himself, took selfies, signed autographs, and then boldly asked Brooke to dance. Brooke initially refused, but the other guests encouraged her, and Frank did not resist, so she reluctantly accepted. Once on the dance floor, Brooke found Mark charming, young, handsome, and an excellent dancer. His touch and words resonated with her, and as they danced, she became more attracted to him. She continued to dance with him throughout the evening, her desire for him growing stronger. By the end of the evening, Mark led Brooke off the dance floor to a private area. He kissed her, expressed his feelings, and invited her to his home to spend more time together. He described how they would bond and have a memorable night. Brooke was captivated and thought about Mark as she sat with Frank and the other guests. She was conflicted about leaving Frank for a stranger, but was excited by the idea of being with Mark. Brooke felt guilty about her growing attraction to Mark, but tried to justify her feelings. She saw Mark as a chance for a unique adventure and believed Frank might understand. She knew Mark was a local celebrity and professional athlete, which made the opportunity even more enticing. As the birthday celebration ended and the guests moved to another location for more festivities, Mark approached their table and asked Brooke to dance again. Frank seemed irritated. Despite Mark's persistent requests for her attention, Brooke managed to sidestep her husband's concerns. Enjoying the song, she agreed to one last dance with Mark. Mark thanked Frank for his patience, then led Brooke to the dance floor. Laughing, she gave in completely to him. As the dance ended, Mark promised Brooke he would address any worries Frank might have and assured her of her safety. Brooke then went to the back exit, ready to leave with Mark. However, their plans were interrupted when Frank suddenly appeared at the back door, stopping her. "Brooke, where are you going?" he demanded. "I'm going with Mark," Brooke replied emotionlessly. "Are you going to his place?" Frank asked, trying to stay calm. "Yes, but it's complicated," Brooke said. "I'll call or text you later to explain. I need to go now. Mark is waiting." Frank insisted. "No, Brooke, you need to explain this now." Brooke became defensive. "You don't command me, Frank. You're my wife, and you won't leave until you explain," Frank retorted, sensing Brooke's hesitation. Sighing, Brooke confessed, "Frank, this sounds terrible, but I'm going to spend the night with Mark. He'll bring me back tomorrow." Frank, shocked and angry, responded, "No, Brooke, you can't do this. Are you planning to be intimate with him?" Brooke remained silent, staring at the ground. "Yes, Frank, you're right," she finally admitted. Frank, disturbed by her admission, struggled to keep his composure. "This is unbelievable," he said.
"Why are you doing this? Frankel, I know it sounds crazy, but
Every woman dreams of a romance with someone famous or wealthy. Mark is more than just anyone. He's amazing, a real gentleman, a star, and a celebrity, Brooke explained. I want to live that dream just for one night. Please, Frank, let me do this. Frank, feeling hurt, asked, so you're abandoning me for your Prince Charming? No, Frank, you're special, Brooke insisted. But tonight, I want to experience this fantasy. Tomorrow, I'll come back, and we'll continue as a happy couple. Frank was incredulous. So, it's not an affair because it's just one night? Yes, Brooke replied. When I return tomorrow, my dream will have come true. We'll both be happy. Frank, feeling betrayed, asked, so tonight, you're choosing Mark Leia over me because he's more attractive or exciting? It's not about love, Frank, Brooke said. I don't love him, but I want to experience something different. Frank, frustrated, asked, is it because you're bored with me? No, Frank, you're the best, Brooke said. But you still need someone else? Frank interrupted. Yes, she admitted quietly. So, you want to spend a passionate night with Mark Leia because of his looks? Frank asked. I've decided to do something many women only dream of, Brooke replied. But I'm not leaving you. I just need this one night. Frank, taking a deep breath, asked, why, Brooke? Why do you think that sleeping with another guy and then coming back to me as if it's nothing should be acceptable to me? Frank asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Because you've always shown me respect and approached me with an open heart, Brooke replied softly. You understand my feelings, needs, and wants with consideration and care. I believe that when you see how important this evening is to me, you'll control your annoyance and approach it calmly. Please make this work, Brooke pleaded, trying to sound confident. Can I really handle this? She wondered aloud. Explain to me how I'm supposed to accept that you'll be sleeping in Mark's bed tonight and that he will be with you all night. How am I supposed to face tomorrow when I know you two spent the entire evening together? Not just a moment. How can I look at you knowing you've been with someone else? Frank asked, his voice trembling. I don't have a perfect answer for you, Brooke admitted. I can only hope you can find a way to deal with this and move on with our lives. You're upset with me. But do you realize how important this experience is for me? So, you expect me to swallow my pride and put up with your escapade with Mark? Frank said bitterly. It's not a fling. Frank, Brooke said, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't expect you to be okay with it, but you're the one who loves me the most and is closest to me. I'm asking you to accept my needs and feelings and make peace with them. You're my friend, my dear spirit. I hope you'll let me have this unique experience that I may never have again. This is my request to you, sweetie, she added. Frank was briefly perplexed, trying to understand how she could hope for his acceptance. The more he thought about her plan, the clearer it became that she was caught in a fantasy, unable to comprehend the gravity of her actions and their impact on their relationship. Brooke, do you know what they call a man whose wife is having an affair for pleasure with another man? Frank asked. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. They call him a cuckold, but I won't be made fun of by you and Mark, he declared firmly. You're not going to do this. Tears filled Brooke's eyes as she turned to face Frank. You're not going to stop me, she said.
No, Brooke, I won't get in the way. You're an adult and can make your own decisions. If you think this is what you should do, then it's entirely up to you. Go ahead and spend the night with him. Do all the things you consider to be loving closeness.
I won't obstruct your way,
Frank said, his voice steady but full of pain. But Frank, it's only a physical relationship. It's not about love.
I love you.
Not him. I'm physically drawn to Mark, not emotionally, Brooke argued. So, you're making a distinction between physical attraction and love, Frank concluded. Yes, Frank. I am. You're my spouse, my best friend, and my soulmate. I'll come back to you because of our love, not just physical desire, Brooke reassured him. Frank took a deep breath, trying to process her words. If this is really your wish, then go ahead and seek it, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. Brooke looked at him, panic in her eyes. What do you mean? I mean that before you leave, we will remove our rings and formally dissolve our union. As soon as you walk out that door, our marriage ends, Frank clarified. Frank, please, let's not make this worse, Brooke begged. We agreed on this, Frank said.
So,
what is your decision? I'm not sure, she murmured. Absurd. You know exactly what you want. You want to spend the night with Mark, and then come back to me.
are you serious?
Brooke, Frank asked, his voice breaking as she sobbed harder. Just one night, she whispered, barely audible. Will you dissolve our marriage? Brooke asked Mark, her voice trembling. He confirmed with absolute seriousness. Brooke's reaction quickly changed from panic to rage as she understood why she had to spend the night with Mark, and her resolve crumbled in front of her. Frank, my emotions and sentiments actually have meaning on their own. Do you really mean you would immediately dissolve our marriage over this, without giving us a chance to work things out and move forward as a couple? She questioned. Brooke, some things in life cannot be changed, Frank replied,
One of them is that I won't agree to a situation in which you have an intimate relationship with Mark and then expect us to carry on with our lives as if it's unimportant. My emotions matter too. You don't understand feelings or needs, she sarcastically retorted. Just a few moments ago, you were ready to leave without any explanation. You would be on your way to Mark's place right now if I hadn't followed you and stopped you, Frank said. Since it's clear that my feelings and opinions don't matter to you, why should yours mean anything to me? Frank, I apologize so much. I never realized, Brooke said, her voice wavering. I could only think of getting ready. Don't say you didn't think about it. Brooke, you planned to spend the night with him without considering my viewpoint. Why did you abandon your destination and your behavior? Frank pressed. Oh, God. Frank, please believe me. I did not intend to leave without telling you. I meant to send you a message explaining where I am, she pleaded. Frank laughed bitterly. So you're saying you meant to message me when you were already in bed with him? It's cruel and heartless. Brooke, it's shocking and heartbreaking that you would temporarily leave your husband for a night with another man. Brooke sobbed. It's not that big of a deal. I just didn't think. Now that I intercepted you, it doesn't matter what you thought or didn't think, or what you said or didn't say. Now, we have to face reality, Frank stated resolutely. Brooke looked questioningly at Frank. What's the reality? She asked. The reality is that Mark is waiting for you outside, Frank said. It's your decision. After 12 years, this is where we are. If you walk out that door, I assume he's getting impatient. After a brief pause, Brooke said, Frank, I won't walk through that door. I will not give up on you for him. I will not give up our shared life for this. Frank observed her closely. What's different now? You looked prepared to go with him a quarter of an hour ago. Everything's pretty much the same except that I'm not sure I want to get a divorce, Brooke admitted. So, does your desperate want for intimacy with Mark suddenly disappear? Or are you still feeling it? Are you planning to be unfaithful to me when I'm not around? Frank pressed. No. Frank, why would you believe that? Brooke raised her voice, tears streaming down her face. I love you so much that I have never betrayed you. But earlier tonight, if I hadn't stepped in, you were about to be disloyal, Frank said. You were about to betray me for the second time at this very moment. The revelation hit Brooke hard. My gosh, what was I thinking? She cried. I'm so confused. I don't know how I came to believe that going with Mark was okay, that it wouldn't be incorrect or annoy you.
Frank listened with mistrust.
You have to be really honest with me. Brooke, what got through to you? It all began when Mark approached our table, motioned for me to dance, and ushered me onto the dance floor, Brooke admitted. He was so audacious and persistent, voicing his desire for me and how much fun it would be to have a romantic relationship with him. Then he hugged me, kissed me, and began to touch me. But I didn't resist. I didn't push him away. Shh. So, you encouraged him, Frank said. Yes, I encouraged him, she admitted. I'm sincerely sorry. Frank, I convinced myself that I should go with him, that it was the right decision and that you would understand and be okay with it. I acknowledge my grave error and deeply apologize. Frank's eyes hardened as he thought about the note the waiter had given him. He dug into his pocket and showed it to Brooke. When Brooke finished reading the note, she asked, Where did this come from? The waiter handed it to me during our meal, Frank answered. Is this some kind of ploy he uses? Brooke wondered aloud. What's written here? It's clear that he picked you out of the crowd, luring you in with an enticing lie, Frank stated. Brooke was shocked. I can't believe it, she said. I let myself get caught up in this. Now you understand, Frank said, his voice softening a bit. It's not just about one night. It's about the trust and respect we've built over the years. You almost threw it all away for a fantasy. Brooke nodded, tears streaming down her face. Frank, I promise I'll never let something like this happen again. I love you, and I want to work on our marriage. Frank took a deep breath. Still hurt but willing to try. We'll take it one step at a time. Brooke, but it won't be easy to rebuild the trust. I know, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes, Brooke said, looking at Frank with determination and hope. Frank clarified that Brooke had treated him poorly by reading over the note several times. Was this all just for fun? She asked. Frank answered. Yes. Everything he told you was just for fun. Brooke felt horrified to learn that she was just the object of this week's plot, a reward to satisfy Mark Laval's desire. Last week, it could have been Debbie. This week, Sandy. But this time, it was her. Feeling nauseous, Brooke admitted her mistake and realized she had put her marriage in jeopardy. She quickly went to the bathroom, washed her hands and face repeatedly, and stared at her exhausted reflection in the mirror. When she emerged, she found Frank waiting by the door. Oh, Frank, I'm so sorry. Please pardon my ignorance and naivety, she begged through tears. Frank looked at her. Brooke, when Laval caught you off guard,
He charmed you to the point that you thought having a sexual relationship with him wouldn't have any negative effects. You thought I wouldn't care if you had a brief interaction with him.
But now that you've learned otherwise, you need to promise me that we won't ever be in this situation again. As Frank was speaking, he noticed two of Laval's companions still in the restaurant, watching them. Brooke, I need to talk to Laval's friends, he said. Brooke pleaded. Please, Frank, let's just go home. We don't need any more trouble. No, Brooke, I can't leave this unresolved, Frank said firmly. He walked over to Laval's friends while Brooke stood by, nervous and alone. Gentlemen, we seek no trouble, Frank said. One of the men replied. It's okay. We understand. Then obey my instructions and tell your friend Laval that he failed today, and that he was defeated. Frank Walker will declare to the world that Mark Laval is a failure, Frank ordered. We can't tell him this, one of the men protested. You want to face me or him? Frank asked. The men exchanged glances, and one of them picked up the phone to deliver Frank's message. The conversation was brief, but Frank felt the anger in their tone. When Frank asked for Laval's response, one of the men replied. He said, Okay. After everything, Frank, I swear to you that I won't let another man get close to me, Brooke said, looking at Frank with tear-filled eyes. Okay, Frank said, and when we socialize like we did tonight, I'll make an effort to help you keep that promise. I should have intervened before Laval ensnared you, but I didn't. The fault lies with Laval as much as it does with us. He shouldn't have pursued a married woman. Oh, Frank, I'm grateful for your understanding, but let's just ignore Mark. We won't ever come into contact with him again, Brooke said. I hope Mark faces consequences for his actions. He almost cost us our marriage, Frank said. I understand, and I'll think about it, Brooke promised. Frank then asked, Do you want to go back to the celebration? No, Frank. Let's just go home, Brooke said. Yes, Brooke. Let's go home, Frank agreed. As they walked back to the restaurant, they retrieved Brooke and left. While they waited for their car, an SUV sped towards them and stopped suddenly. The passenger window rolled down, revealing Mark Laval inside. Brooke, you said you'd come with me. Please. Get in the car, Mark shouted. She won't go with you, Frank shot back. I'm not talking to you, old man. Mark yelled. Hurry up, Brooke. Let's go now. No, Mark, I can't go with you tonight, Brooke answered firmly. Mark became agitated. Come on, get in the car and let's go, he insisted. You're a loser. You lost the game. Get out of here and let us be, Frank said loudly. Mark, infuriated, yelled, I'll show you who the real loser is, as he drove away. Frank warned the group of people waiting for their cars to keep their distance. Despite the risks, Frank was determined to keep Brooke safe, no matter the cost. I'll stop you, Lavalier, if you try anything with Brooke, Frank warned sternly, stepping back a few meters with his hands raised in a defensive yet non-threatening posture. He urged Lavalier to drop his weapon before things got out of hand, his voice calm but firm. Lavalier, fueled by rage and frustration, didn't notice Frank reaching into his pocket for his Sig Sauer handgun loaded with defense rounds. Frank's military training kicked in, honed from years of real-life combat situations, preparing him for the tense standoff. With steady nerves, Frank aimed his revolver at Lavalier, firing 2 precise shots to neutralize the threat. But before he could react, 3 shots rang out from another direction. Startled, Frank turned to see an unexpected assailant aiming at Lavalier, who had collapsed to the ground. Keeping his composure, Frank instructed the assailant to lower their weapon, revealing himself as an off-duty officer. Relief washed over the scene as security personnel arrived, confirming Frank's actions were justified in protecting Brooke. Meanwhile, Mark, injured and in pain from gunshot wounds, was attended to by paramedics. Amidst the chaos, accusations flew about who fired the fatal shots. Mark, struggling for breath, pleaded innocence, claiming it was a misunderstanding. As Mark's condition worsened, Frank realized the severity of the situation. Despite efforts, Mark succumbed to his injuries before midnight, leaving a somber aftermath. In the aftermath, Frank and Brooke found themselves recounting the events to law enforcement officials. Their night had started with celebration but ended tragically, entangled in the unforeseen demise of a local figure. Driving home later, silence hung heavy between Frank and Brooke until she broke it with a poignant question. Do you regret not finishing him off? She asked, her voice tinged with the weight of what had transpired. Frank nodded solemnly. The night had taught them both about the thin line between protection and tragedy, and the irreversible choices made in the heat of the moment. After hours of relentless pursuit, Lavalier finally caught up with Brooke, his intentions clear as he attempted to whisk her away for his own gratification. It was a perilous moment, one that could have ended in tragedy if not for Frank's timely intervention. Like a watchful guardian,
Frank stepped in to protect Brooke from Lavaliere's advances, his resolve unwavering despite the escalating tension. The aftermath left Frank with a mix of emotions. Dissatisfaction and fury simmered within him as he reflected on how the confrontation with Lavaliere and the involvement of the female security guard had unfolded. Brooke, on the other hand, was convinced that Frank had acted deliberately when Mark confronted them outside the restaurant. She harbored a deep-seated belief that the outcome wouldn't have been favorable for Mark, a young and volatile celebrity known for his ego and temper. Before Mark even stepped out of his SUV, the dynamics had already shifted. Brooke knew Frank was armed, and she suspected he had intentionally lured Mark into a situation that would likely end in tragedy. She couldn't shake the guilt that somehow her actions, or lack thereof, had contributed to the deadly outcome. They discussed the likely media portrayal of the incident and the scrutiny that would follow. Frank acknowledged that despite acting in what he believed to be justified self-defense, public opinion and media narratives could skew against him. Driving home together, silence weighed heavily between them until Frank broached a sensitive topic. "Do you regret not taking a stronger stand against him?" he asked, his voice gentle yet probing. Brooke's candid response surprised him, revealing an undercurrent of unresolved tension and unspoken desires within their marriage. Frank grappled with feelings of mistrust, questioning whether he could continue to place faith in their relationship. The events of the evening had laid bare a divide between them, one that could not be easily bridged with mere words. Their journey home became a somber reflection on the complexities of love, loyalty, and the unforeseen twists of fate. Each passing mile echoed with unspoken thoughts and introspection, leaving them both uncertain about the future of their relationship. As they navigated these emotional waters, Frank and Brooke found themselves pondering the profound implications of their choices. The night had brought into sharp relief the fragile balance between desire and betrayal, truth and deception. They were left to confront the realities of their bond, grappling with the aftermath of a night that had forever altered their lives. In the quiet of the car, with the road stretching out ahead of them, Frank and Brooke silently contemplated what lay ahead. Their journey together had taken an unexpected turn, challenging them to confront their own vulnerabilities and the complexities of their shared history. Considered his prompt and direct reply, sensing the bitterness in his voice, Frank felt dissatisfied and furious at the way the event involving the Lavaliere and the female security guard ended. Brooke was positive that Frank had committed the act when Mark confronted them outside the restaurant. Walker's challenge, and she believed it wouldn't be favorable for Mark Lavaliere, a young celebrity, despite having a massive ego, a volatile temperament, and a weapon. Frank Walker was an accomplished business strategist used to challenging powerful people in rage that this grown-up engaging in when juvenile antics tried to take his wife away from him right in front of him. Mark Lavaliere was unable to escape the consequences. Brooke knew without a doubt that Frank was armed, and that he had purposely lured Mark into a situation in which he would probably pass away telling Mark that he had lost their game and calling him a failure, which was done just for selfish as Laura, and eventually Mark fell for the bait, dooming him. As a result, Brooke was... Before Mark Lapierre even got out of his SUV and watched the fight between the two men, he knew he was doomed. She may have loved her husband, but she was very unhappy because she thought she was to blame for Mark's death. He would still be alive if he hadn't selected her, and she hadn't agreed to go with him. But by some strange turn of events, Lavaliere was tragically shot by an off-duty police officer who thought he was defending Frank from harm, unintentionally kept Lavender from facing the repercussions of trying to run away with his wife. But it also spared Brooke the agony of realizing her spouse was the murderer. "Well, I'm glad you didn't kill him." She told him why Frank asked, since it would be better if the officer did, she clarified. "Do you mean by the..." Frank the police asked. "Yes." And according to the media, she added that the press and police would have tried to sensationalize it if I had done it, but it would have been a simple case of self-defense. But instead of acting civilly, he displayed a gun and threatened my life several times while only 3 meters away. Therefore, it would have served as a defense. Justified act of self-defense to employ deadly force in spite of the judgments of the media and police, he said. "Yes, but the press would question and examine your decision to kill him rather than hurt him." Said that, in fact, it is their responsibility to ask, guess, and provide criticisms. But the truth is that he was armed with a lethal weapon and could have killed someone even if he had been hurt. He reacted, saying, "Oh, she," leaving me with little choice but to go for a decisive strike for my safety and self-defense. Though I wouldn't have killed him, the media would nonetheless portray his statements as upsetting. Frank shared that they would blame me for something, and I would take the responsibility. Absolutely true. They will so get ready for the criticism we'll encounter. There is a limit to how much aid an attorney can offer, so rest assured that media will fabricate a story to make it seem like you and I had something to do with his death. So we might be subject to lawsuits and disagreements, but don't worry. We can handle them and win because, after all, he tricked you and attacked you, Frank clarified, reminding her to endure with us after threatening me and making us the victims. Keeping in mind that he was a beloved South Carolina local hero and a well-known football player, adored. Hence, he can never go wrong in the eyes of the media. Comprehend that for a while, all the press will have to provide is the heartbreaking story of Mark Lallier, who is depicted as a victim of a furious wife, who ultimately caused a security guard to kill him. But ultimately when Mark Lavalier's story is revealed, the media's fervor for the saga of a sports star will fade. My wish for everything is to become an icon known for luring married women out for nighttime adventures, she said. Just disappear. And Frank assured her that they would continue. They drove in silence for a short while before Frank posed a thought-provoking query regarding her possible regrets. Brooke, surprised and hurt by Frank's question, and angry at having missed a night of passionate intimacy with him, fired him After a moment to consider how to reply, she seemed shocked at his boldness and was firm. Said, "No, sweetheart, this is not the deception Frank was expecting to hear." But the prolonged quiet and the expression in her eyes, which was naturally not too serious, verified his suspicions that she was thinking back on the passing of her fantastical experience. Therefore, he tried to, despite her tone of voice and word choice, she tried to hide her disappointment from him. Betrayed her. But Frank didn't react negatively because he knew the exchange had broken and rekindled. The idea that she was only a wife, that she was a person free to pursue pleasure with someone else, and that her spouse engaged Brooke in a dance lavalier during their dance. Talks about wishes that, even between spouses, are frequently kept silent. As Brooke listened, his remarks piqued her interest, and Lavalier convinced her that she should discuss these forbidden feelings with a friend who she could be totally honest and open with. Unrestrained, a partner without any emotional ties. Someone who had indulged in excess, helping her find the seductive facets of her personality. Hence, betrayal was set in motion. Despite her previous promise to abstain, Frank knew she was open to intimacy with other men today. This was just a ploy to get her out of her current situation when she encountered such encounters. Frank stopped her from leaving with Lavalier after observing a shift in her tone and demeanor. Acts showed that she was willing to pursue intimacy with someone, even though she wasn't ready to follow these desires just yet. But that was only when Frank was aware of all these specifics, realized he would never be able to trust her again, and as they drove home, he wondered if he could live with his mistrust. Approach her and acknowledge the possibility that she would take advantage of the opportunity to be with another man. Brooke would most likely seize the opportunity. This narrative is packed with suspense and surprising turns. Its emotional profundity makes us pause to consider the ramifications of our choices, and causes us to consider the boundary between moral standards and our wants, and between truth and lie.